Hi, I'm Jo Brand, comedian, and if people like me have to get involved, you know we're in deep shit.
I'm Nish Kumar, comedian, and my expertise is triggering your racist uncle, often just by opening my mouth.
This is a clever idea. I like this idea.
Oh, thanks, Richard.
Yeah. It wasn't your idea, was it?
What do you mean? It can't possibly be my idea because it was clever.
It's clever, yes.
No, it
Why
wasn't.
should
No, it wasn't my idea, no.
In 23 days from the day of this recording, you're trying to get all 650 MPs to Westminster Central Hall in London for the national emergency briefing which you've organised. But what is it?
Thank you for that induced wave of nausea you've just given me. Shit. What it is an attempt to get as many policymakers and leaders into a room and brief them on the climate and nature crisis. All about how the climate crisis will affect us in the UK. And so we cover climate, we cover nature, we cover national security, we cover food, we cover health, economics. So we're trying to put it in the whole spectrum of what would happen in our lives if we don't change course quite urgently. And we're really blessed to have a whole ton of serious supporters, from the National Trust to Royal Meteorological Society to Reading University, Newcastle University, Royal Society of Biology. There's a whole big list who also, many of them want to be supportive in rolling out the film. And the Church of England, for example, have said this is not all agreed, but we've just been talking. Maybe we could show this in our cathedrals. This is a thing that you can do that makes a difference.
Just one quick thing before we get into the episode. This podcast is brought to you by Ecology, the UK's most trusted climate action platform. They help businesses to reduce their emissions, restore our planet, and report their progress for every step of their climate journey. If you'd like to learn more, check them out with the link in the show notes. Let's get on with the episode. Nick, thank you very much for coming on the Climate Unfucked podcast.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to this.
So, first question, I'm really interested. In 23 days from the day of this recording, you're trying to get all 650 MPs to Westminster Central Hall in London for the national emergency briefing which you've organised. But what is it?
Thank you for that induced wave of nausea you've just given me. Shit. Yes. No. It is coming up fast, isn't it? And when we organised this, it seemed so far away. What it is an attempt to get as many policymakers and leaders into a room and brief them on the climate and nature crisis. And so by that, I mean not just the usual climate stuff that seems to be about parts per million and more global issues and coral reefs failing, but all about how the climate crisis will affect us in the UK. And so we cover climate, but we cover nature, we cover national security, we cover food, we cover health, economics. So we're trying to put it in the whole spectrum of what would happen in our lives if we don't change course quite urgently. And we're racing towards that deadline. But I'm very pleased to say we have around 100 parliamentarians confirmed. But as you say, 650 is a lot, isn't it? I mean, in all honesty, there is little hope of getting them all there, but we really would like to get, a couple of hundred into that room. I think it's critical. If we're going to make the decisions that we need to make, they need to hear this direct from the experts, a bit like we all did in COVID.
So can you just map it out what it looks like? It's a day, it's a morning, it's a few hours. What happens at the briefing? Who speaks?
Okay, so it is, first of all, the venue is really interesting. Actually, this is worth backtracking. So this is my brother conceived this project. We used to work together running a business over 10 years ago. But we both were climate campaigners, and our paths have come around and fully converged, and now we're working together again. But he started talking about a briefing, and he started talking about a briefing that was aligned with what happened in COVID. And, to punch you through the headlines, because I guess people listening to this podcast are in the bubble, aren't we? But most people are not in the bubble. Most people think climate change is a faraway thing that is for the next generation or even your grandkids. So we're always thinking and working towards how we break out of that bubble. How do we reach a broader, group of people? And he started talking about a briefing that was aligned with the way we did COVID, when you line up the literal experts who are professionals on these subjects that we need to talk about, rather than going through the lens of the media, where it's a screaming headline. It can be a headline but it's not quite hysterical, or usually a headline pouring doubt and sort of serious questions over all the technologies, that delay tactic. And in COVID, we all stopped for a moment and listened, didn't we? And we took on this whole new information. And I know it was different because it was coming so quickly, but this science is more solid than COVID. So we need to get that through. So he started talking about this. I was busy doing my thing with Climate Science Breakthrough, and it was the day he told me that he'd hired, I'm going back to the hall now, he told me he'd hired Westminster Central Hall for the event. And then I sort of took a moment and thought, okay, this is a thing now. I'm going to have to get involved.
You took it seriously
on your own. Yes. And the reason is it's leaning into what the establishment would do. Westminster Central Hall is kind of across the road from the Houses of Parliament, so guarantees MPs can find it really easy to get there. But it's this huge monolith, really, it's a really serious building. And it's the location of the first ever UN conference in 1946, I believe. So it's got all this weight behind it, all this seriousness behind it. And I think that suddenly means we can try and turn this into a national moment. So now we have the hall. And now the thing is to fill the hall. And if originally, I think he was thinking of doing it in a conference room in Portcullis House, which would have been 100 people. The hall is around 700-800 people. And it can be expanded. There's an upper circle to sort of 1,400, 500. So this is a serious amount of people. So the idea is that we fill that with as many MPs as we can get. As I said, 200, 300 would be great. But also people from every aspect of our lives. So mayors, metro mayors, council leaders, faith leaders, civil servants, financial people, insurance people, banking people, construction people, telecoms people, but leaders in the sectors, NHS people, and unions. We have a number of unions now who are supporting this. Professional bodies, we've got quite a few professional bodies behind this. Risk people who work in the risk space. And the idea is to convene them all together, to have these 8 talks delivered by our experts, as I mentioned, going through all the aspects. Because I think what happens in climate communication is you get a big paper or a conference, and it's about the Arctic, or it's about sea level rise, or it's about migration. Yeah, it's always very specific, isn't it? And then it dives straight into this massive detail that's quite hard to digest, and only the people in the bubble read, to be honest. And then people move on, and maybe the headline is, super scary, but it doesn't really equate to anything. So the idea here is that we've got these 8 experts, but they only speak for 10 minutes. So we're very conscious that we're taking up MPs' time specifically, but also all these leaders. So we hope in about an hour and a half to have gone through every single 10-minute talk. And it leans into a bit like a TED Talk. So you will have charts on the screen where relevant, because this is science we're talking about, but really it's about the person delivering their sort of high level overview of, let's say the food situation, or the situation of in health, for example. Professor Hugh Montgomery just describing what would happen to the NHS as we run into sort of 2 degrees plus, and I think that's really critical, because it doesn't get bogged down, as I say, in all that detail that's so specific, but it just sketches out each sector. But it starts on a sort of narrative arc that's a bit like my Climate Science Breakthrough films in a way. It starts with the serious, brutal truth at the beginning. You can't not put that on the table. And you'll have heard this, people saying, let's stop scaring people. You can't.
Bill Gates said it recently, didn't he?
I know, but you can't, especially if you're a policymaker. I bet when they have the National Security Council meeting about the nuclear threat, they don't dial it all down, and say it's probably fine. So you start with the brutal truths, running out of food, for example, collapse of the NHS, losing control of our borders, not figuratively as now. And then it talks about the pathways out, because that's, I think, one of the reasons why I do what I do, because you see this problem is really quite gobsmackingly terrifying, but you also see that we've literally got a queue of solutions lying here waiting to be delivered. I mean, quick food one, because I love this one that Professor Paul Behrens will cover. You know, if we shift our diet to plant-rich, we don't have to completely give up meat and dairy, but shift it to plant-rich diet, we effectively free up an area of land the size of Scotland, because animal agriculture is so land intensive, area intensive, if that's the expression. You'll hear it from the professor. And so you make these changes and the gains are enormous. You know, nature can suddenly breathe again. We get all these wild spaces back, and all we have to do is just eat slightly differently. I mean, it's not as if we're having to reinvent the wheel everywhere. You know, same with deploying renewables. You know, look at the price crash of batteries, solar, wind. You know, it keeps happening. So all these positive pathways are lying there. So they'll go through, take you through all that. Then we break for questions. Our experts will be available for these VIP people who are in the room to talk to straight after the event. And I'm pretty sure the MPs will be dashing straight back to Parliament, because it is actually the budget the day before. So there will be plenty of other things going on. But then we will, obviously the event will end about 12:30, but we'll be filming the entire thing. So there'll be footage of every single talk, and that footage will all be made available on YouTube and on our website. So you'll be able to do the individual food talk, health talk, etc., etc. But at the same time, we're going to make a film of the whole thing, like a 30-minute film that isn't just dry people talking. It's going to have, it's going to get more emotive. So we're going to bring reactions in of people who were there. If we get some, you know, famous people turning up, we'll try and get reactions of some people that you might recognise, but also reactions of very ordinary people. Maybe some people who work in, you know, the fire brigade union are coming. They're desperately worried about wildfires in the future. So maybe reactions from people working in the fire service or the NHS to what they've just heard. And the film in 2026 then gets rolled out nationally. And it's if the event is top down, the film is supposed to be sort of grassroots, bottom-up solution where you could take that film. Your MP is Rebecca Long Bailey, isn't she?
Yeah.
Take that film, go to your little town hall, village hall, whatever is nearby, that you could convene a little meeting, 35, 40 minutes of film watching, but you invite the MP, you invite anyone connected to climate or the solutions to that, and you have a discussion. And then it goes back round in full circle. It's not just an event that can maybe be forgotten about and MPs can just rush off and pretend it never happened. It will keep coming back because the film will keep getting shown and MPs will keep getting invited to the film. And we're really blessed to have a whole ton of serious supporters, from the National Trust to Royal Meteorological Society to Reading University, Newcastle University, Royal Society of Biology. There's a whole big list who also, many of them want to be supportive in rolling out the film. And the Church of England, for example, have said this is not all agreed, but we've just been talking. Maybe we could show this in our cathedrals. So it might be that the film will be seen from in a sort of parish hall, and it might be right up to a cathedral. And so if we get this right, we keep the momentum going, and we kind of create this national moment that's hard to avoid. And the final thing on this, I think, is to say is what I am really keen on is having us witness our MPs hear the scary stuff. So, you know, when a new climate policy comes out or a new excuse why we're not doing something is stated, it'll be so powerful to say, no, wait, no, hang on. I saw you. I saw you hear what I heard that from that, you know, serious expert. You heard that, and I saw you. I witnessed you. And so for you to come along now and say it's okay, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, which is completely inadequate, it's going to be a lot harder for them to justify when we've all witnessed, you know, what the threat really is and what we really should be doing.
Why do you? Because firstly, it's incredible to have got that many big organisations on board. The support from, you didn't name some of the other headline speakers, but there's some real big hitters in there. And also, who've you got introducing the whole thing? It's a more like
we have.
Well-known
I'm missing our chair. So yeah, our chair is Mike Berners-Lee. And he is author of many books on climate, but he's a professor. He's probably got the most rounded view of the whole climate and nature issue, I would say. So he can talk to just about all those points because he's literally written the book about it, trying to package it all up together. One thing, I mean, his recent book's all about the truth and how important the truth is in politics. You really should get him on here. He's fantastic.
He's coming on next
rapid-
Thursday.
Oh, fantastic. Excellent. That again is really important because, we're living in this world now where people are just throwing around misinformation and half-truths. And it's just sitting there and it's not really getting challenged. And I think, particularly on climate, we don't have enough people appearing on Sunday Politics Question Time, the talk radio, all the different places where we hear chat about climate. There's no one to counter it. And so,
sense check.
Exactly. And so what the work I do, I think a lot of that's about trying to equip other people with all the responses to the misinformation. But also I'm trying to see, these experts that we've got coming, the people that we've used in the climate science breakthrough films, they should be on TV. They should be on these talk shows and panel shows and discussion programs. I mean, the reason why I started, the work I first did with the climate comedy was Kevin Anderson, who is speaking, is probably going to be our first speaker on climate at the event. And he had this devastating talk that just literally, had me not in bits. What was it? Mike Berners-Lee calls it a one-way gate. Where you've just had a moment where you've peered into something and finally the penny has dropped and you've understood something that's so threatening that it's moved you to the point of action. And that's what his talk did. But interestingly, it looked like my son had shot it at uni on his phone because it was in this, side lecture room with bad lighting and bad. It didn't look very important. So when you send it to someone who isn't in the bubble and say, you've got to listen to this guy, it's really serious. Well, I'll listen to him, but this doesn't look important. It's not.
Who is this guy? Why should I listen?
It's not. Yeah, we're all used to great production values, aren't we, in the content that we watch. So if you see a sort of academic fringe meeting taking place, you don't take it seriously. So my work has all been about how do we put that person, how do we package them, put them in a context that allows them to be taken seriously. That could have been through comedy, but here it's to standing in that building with all that historical importance in front of all those people who really matter and saying that stuff out loud, which I think up to now has really been missing.
It's just to go back to what you started with about the importance of it. I've seen you elsewhere say that the reason that this is necessary is because it's kind of being, we're doing a good job as Britain. We're only 1% of emissions. We've dropped them by whatever percentage, 50 or more percent since the 1970s or 80s. We're doing a good job. We're not the problem. That's kind of a bit of the, we might do a bit of drilling in the North Sea, but, that's just for our energy security. But your narrative is like, we need to wake up here. Why do you think that isn't, do MPs not know this? Are they kind of sleepwalking a bit on this? Do they need to be shaken?
So first of all, I'm very sympathetic with MPs. I mean, who would have a go at doing that? I mean, seriously, just the abuse you're going to get, the dealing with all the issues in your parliamentary office, most of which you probably can't address properly. I mean, so lots of sympathy and respect for them. But they're also, I don't think they're exposed to the information for one. So it depends which side of the divide they sit on, so which newspaper they read. But also the government's full of lobbyists. And we know government's full of lobbyists because if you followed people like DSMOB, you can read about how many visits there have been from the fossil fuel industry to government. But also you can see it in the policy. Hey, let's do this carbon capture thing. It's brilliant. It'd be really, I mean, this stuff doesn't work and it's been so roundly dismantled. But you mentioned the emissions one, and that's a classic. And I think most of them genuinely think that. And plenty of people in the climate space, repeat it. And it's only from, me spending all my life in the bubble that I've finally wrapped my head around it. But just to touch on it briefly. So the UK is now claiming 50% emissions cuts. They always use 1990 as the baseline year. I'm actually not sure why that is. Mike Berners-Lee will know, but 1990 is the year we all measure from. And, we're over 50%, so get us, why do we need to bother even do anything else? But if you break that down, it's just clever accounting. So we don't include Drax, so it's a power station that burns biomass.
Trees.
which
Oh.
imported from America. Anyway, lots of studies into this. It's worse than coal in terms of emissions. We don't have to go into details. It's just super bad. It's our single biggest source of carbon emissions. We don't include that in those numbers. We don't include aviation. I know that's only a few percent, but we fly more per head of population more than just about anybody else because we live on an island. So, it's and it's growing quickly. It's quite a big deal. We don't include imports, shipping. So that's probably the clincher. So as a nation, sort of throughout my lifetime, we have shifted lots of our heavy industry away to places like China and India. And so that emissions drop is counted as an emissions drop when actually we're still buying and using and consuming the stuff that's made. It's this thing called territorial emissions, so exactly measured from your country, versus consumption emissions. So it's handy accounting. And if you put all that stuff back in, we've cut by less than 1% a year since 1990. The emissions are still there. I know we made great gains going from coal to gas, but even if you dig into gas and the people who are sort of trying to expose the problem there, we're not measuring all the upstream methane emissions that come from the gas network. And there are loads of issues with gas. It turns out to be a lot worse than we thought as well. Long story short, it's a really nice sounding story that I think leaves people feeling nice and comfortable. For once we're doing really well. I don't have to worry about this problem. I can shift it down my list. Added to that, the other classic is we're only 1% of emissions annually, and we can pick that apart if you like. But so those two facts tend to sit in a place where people just say, look, let's worry about something else, or let's just deflect this and push it away because it doesn't seem to be that important.
Yeah, I think it's a very difficult balance, that positive and we're doing well with we still need to do something, because it can feel demoralizing if it's constantly like we're not doing enough, we haven't made any progress. But if you get too far on we've done an amazing job and we've got lots of wind turbines everywhere, then everyone goes, oh, well, we don't need to worry about that.
Yeah.
So in terms of the practicalities, you've organized this morning basically, and hired a huge hall and invited a lot of important people. How do you actually make sure that what's the how behind it? How do you make sure it happens, and that people turn up, and like inviting these really big guests? How do you get a hold of them? Because that's, I would think, very difficult. And for somebody who's wanting to kind of create their own movement, or interested as to how they could maybe invite people to the showing of the film in their local community, that kind of how you actually get hold of these people and like, you need to come along to this, is quite interesting and useful.
Yes, it's proving to be a real, it's quite draining just fighting this fight to get a piece of information out there that anyone who's campaigning on anything, or I guess working in comms, knows. We've put all the sort of budget into the building and the very small team behind that. We don't have a promotional budget. So point number one was to bring in as many supporters as we could. So, we're working with tons of organizations who are, to a degree, mostly supporting this on their networks, and then the whole climate movement. So I've been, in various different chats with groups and trying to just connect with people and make them understand, that issue about what can I do. And I have to say this carefully because it's mine and my brother's project, so I don't want to sound like I'm bigging it up too much. But this is a thing that you can do that makes a difference. Because I wrestle with this one. I've shifted my diet. I've done lots of other things, and then when you've done them, it doesn't feel like anything happened. And there you are. Me and my wife don't fly, and there you are compromising, because it is a lot easier to fly, and you're not seeing any result for this change that you've made. So this internalizing the issue into your personal actions has got lots of problems around it when it's system change we need from government. But this one I think is really important. We can collectively persuade these, encourage these MPs to turn up. If enough of us contact them, it's as simple as that. I think I don't know the numbers on emails going into MPs' inboxes. It'll be quite big. If they receive one or two saying, "Oh, can you go to this thing?" then I'm probably certain, unless they're a committed, climate campaigner or green MP or something like that, they're probably going to ignore it. But if they receive a whole mass of these, 20, 30 of these, including, as you did today, one of their own personalized video invites, which we think is a first, then the chances of them going to the briefing increases massively, because it's suddenly a feeling of there's something happening here. It might be a bit of FOMO if they miss out, but also a bit of how am I going to justify this to my constituents when I report back that I didn't go to this briefing that everyone is now talking about? So we're in this mission of trying to create this moment where everyone's talking about the briefing, and as many people who are concerned about the climate crisis are then going onto our website, looking at their MP. You just put your postcode in, it's fairly straightforward, and then pinging them an email or one of these videos if they are not down as attending. So in as best we can, we're just trying to create that moment where people get on board and go for it. But I would say it's so much harder now than I started with Climate Science Breakthrough, because going viral on Twitter is it's just a no-no unless you're peddling hate. So getting the word out now is significantly harder than it used to be.
I'm intrigued in the look of the briefing. You've made it look like a government thing. You've got black background, white lettering. You've got the flag. Why have you positioned it like that?
So when I got involved with my brother, we then had a meeting with my fellow co-founders of Climate Science Breakthrough, who are true creatives, former creative directors from the advertising industry. And the reason why I wanted to bring them in was we've got to present this in the right way. And point number one, this can't look like an activist thing. A bunch of activists want to get policymakers and decision makers into hall to rant at us about climate and make us all feel really bad. That would never work, would it? They wouldn't turn up. And actually, it isn't an activist thing; it's a science thing. But if we presented it in the way you see so much climate communication or campaigning communication, then it would just feel like that. So the theme they came to quite early on was, this is the briefing the government should be giving, therefore it should look like that. We need to lean into that. So the logo, we dared use the flag, which for a while was terrifying us, but we were essentially leaning into this being an official briefing, which, is it or isn't it? Well, it kind of is, because these are the people that at government level should be talking to the decision makers in government, because they're all at the top of their game and they're all experts. So it kind of is an official briefing. It's just not organised by the government. So we very purposely lean into that whole government look and feel, and it seems to have worked. I think another important thing, which has helped us get the support, is there's a few. We're not another NGO. So you've probably seen this in the sort of in social justice, climate justice, all the campaigning going on in the country. Everyone has got a mission, and they all tend to stay focused on their own mission quite rightly and quite understandably. I think if we came along and looked like another campaigning organisation, it would be a little bit too competitive. So we are literally. This is not an organisation. It's an event and a project, and it's led by the scientists and the experts, and we are simply the facilitators of that. So that makes us less of a sort of potential competitor to some of the objectives of the organisations that are now supporting us. And the other one is we're working really hard to be non-partisan. So we're not pushing in one political direction or another. We're backing it by the science and what the experts say. So I think all that combined, it's easier to get involved if you're someone who's working in multiple progressive campaigns around the country.
Do you think that, because I feel like that's maybe a mistake that people make, the non-partisan but also looking like an NGO kind of thing. And you've got some really big organisations on board like National Trust or Greenpeace or the WWF. Do you think if you were to look a bit more NGO-like and maybe be more political, you wouldn't have been able to kind of get them on board?
100%. I mean, they've all got to do their due diligence, haven't they? And so we come to the end of this with literally a series of recommendations, not policies, and they're all quite soft. We want the government to follow science-led action. We want another briefing to be held for all the MPs that weren't there. We'd like that televised. We come up with things like forming a climate cobra, and we can come back to that. But essentially, what we're saying quite benignly is, government, can you please take this properly seriously? What we're not doing is saying we want this policy for insulating homes, we want this policy for this amount of renewables by this date, and this date for switching to EVs, because everyone would suddenly get into turmoil because they're already pushing very particular policy platforms, and we'll just be competing with all that. Because it isn't about us setting the policy; it's about us shifting all these people, decision makers, MPs, through this one-way gate, creating this moment, and then all these partners behind us can come along and pick it up and take it from there with that new level of enthusiasm, the right word, but that new level of drive that people would have, to go and get things done. And so I think that's been the only way we've managed to form this coalition by not competing with it, essentially.
I think when people think about climate and nature, they might think about food with nature, or they might think about flying with climate. They think quite directly, but you've got some interesting people from all areas of the economy and society. Specifically, one you were telling me about, the security person, and also the economics person. Why have you kind of brought someone, or what are they going to be talking about, and why bring someone along from like a national security point of view? Because I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, that's for good reason, because point number one, we're trying to cover every aspect of this crisis. And as I said to you, it always seems to shift just to climate or just to nature. And then people often just say, oh, that's a CO2 thing. That doesn't sound very important. Or it's a nature thing. Well, I'm not really into butterflies, so I'm not going to worry about that. But we're trying to bring it down to how you live, how we all live and act. So, running out of food is quite a major thing. And as is national security. So if you look at the projected numbers of people movements when the parts of the world become unstable, it's quite hard to say exactly what they will be. But there's Exeter University put out a report, the Institute of Actuaries. Lots of people have put out reports, but with figures up to 1 billion people being displaced. What gets hard is to then say, well, how many of those will move and leave the borders? Because most people tend to stay within their borders. But I think if we just want to rationalize that for a moment, if you've got huge swathes of the planet that cannot deliver safe conditions to live in food and water, and aren't going to do again. So it's not like there's a war on, let's wait it out and then we'll move back home, or there's a drought, let's just hunker down here near the border and then we'll move back when everything's sorted. These are problems that will, unless we come up with a whole new technology in carbon removal that actually works, that will be, I can only imagine, as permanent. So we're going to see people movements on a scale we've never seen before. And this is being discussed in the corridors of power. So our Lieutenant General Richard Nugey, he's a retired general, and this is something he's trying to sound the alarm on. Our security is paramount, but it's very difficult to see how we can live securely if borders are crumbling because of people are moving around on such a vast scale that no one can quite process or deal with it. And in a way, there's this great sort of a mantra coming from a military person, a former military person, that you wouldn't associate with, the values of climate people, but essentially saying, build renewables as fast as you can. That's for our national security. And that framing's brilliant, isn't it? Because people normally say build renewables because we care about nature, or build renewables because, we don't want global temperatures to go from X to Y. And I think people have difficulty squaring that off. But if you say we need to build out renewables and go through all this adaptation and prepare ourselves, because otherwise societal collapse is actually a serious potential risk. And so when you hear that from someone in the military, it just has that extra weight that's part of the putting the whole thing together. And actually, are we going to get politicians more from the right at this event? Well, I hope we get politicians of all stripes there, but national security certainly appeals to politicians who operate on the centre ground to the right. So that's our way of getting them in, if you like. So yeah, the other thing to say to that is, if you were seriously briefing the government, you know those disaster movies where they all get sat round and they bring in the scientists and they tell them what's going down. They always get ignored, don't they? But you just tell them what all the risks were. You wouldn't hand pick them. You would have them all on the table. And I know from speaking to people like Laurie Layburn, who I really recommend you get on here with this Overshoot podcast, which it's just amazing.
It's really, really good.
But what's alarming about that is by speaking to Laurie, you learn that climate, because it unfolds really slowly over many decades, they stuck it in DEFRA and it's sort of siloed out the way. But
what does DEFRA stand for again? Department for Rural Agricultural Affairs or something. Something like that.
Can't remember. Yeah.
But not that urgent, basically.
Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, I think it is. But it's it's a non-urgent place. But on the National Security Council, they talk about Russia, they talk about nuclear war, they talk about the future of work, would you believe, as a really serious subject. AI, effectively, aren't they, talking about there? But they don't talk about the climate risks as a whole package. It's not a discussion point. And so we are in this strange world where climate, it's left at Ed Miliband. It's sort of out there on a limb, and I think it's because it hasn't been associated with these material risks that threaten the fabric of how we live on a daily basis. So national security, that's why that's in there. And then the economics you asked about is so important. I don't know whether you saw this, but I think it was the Fully Charged. I picked this up from an interview that Fully Charged did with some consultants, but it conjured up this brilliant number from research they did about what people perceive the cost of net zero to be. So the headline cost is 320 billion, which is a lot of money, but it's 0.2% of GDP. In this research, they asked people, what do you think a net zero costs as a percentage of GDP? And the average number they came up with was, I think, 28% of GDP, which is something in the realms of 14,000% higher than it actually costs. Well, in reality, it's I wrote down its cost per person per week. It's £1.30 per person per week, that 320 billion. But the perception is that it's phenomenally expensive. So there's a crazy thing. There's a whole list of crazy things here. This is great. So the other one is the Climate Change Committee have published themselves that once we reach net zero, we will save 37 billion a year. 37 billion every year, and growing. And the reason for that is that electrification is so much more efficient. You've got a much more stable economy because you're not buying gas at these crazy up down prices that you can't control or predict. All the health benefits from people not having chest problems from the atmospheric pollution. It goes on. So there's another one. You've got this extraordinary amount of money that you get back. So the payback on this investment, not this cost, is incredible. And then I think it's £1,000 per household that the Climate Change Committee estimate that people save if we go through this transition. So you've got all these incredible numbers stacking up to show that this is like a really sensible thing. However, what happens in a discussion about climate, it might start with one of the climate threats on Sunday Politics or one of these discussion shows, and it will normally end with but ordinary people can't afford this, and then so let's just not bother. That's the end of the conversation. So, but if you think back, did they ask us to pay for the bailing out the banks, us ordinary people? Did they say, "Oh, sorry, we were going to bail out the banks, but everyone can't afford it, so we're not"? You
didn't cough up, so we can't do it. Sorry.
No. And then when we invented the NHS, did they say, "Well, has anyone got any money to create the NHS?" No. Okay, let's not bother. And the great one, we used to run on something called town gas, and we switched to natural gas. I'm not quite nerdy enough to tell you exactly the difference between the two of them, but we had to re-engineer our entire gas system, I think, in 13 million homes and 40 million appliances. from about late 60s to late 70s. It's said to be the largest peacetime operation in British history, and I'm going to have to talk more about this or post about this.
I've never heard about that.
It's extraordinary, but we did it and we paid for it, and we didn't turn around to people and say, well, we're not going to make this change because you can't afford it. So it's really
COVID
important.
is a classic example as well.
We didn't say to people, sorry, just
can't afford
stay
a
at home
vaccine.
and die because you can't afford to pay for it. So it goes on. Even if we shifted from coal to gas, we didn't charge ordinary working people, as they're called, for doing that. So we've got this problem where economics is normally where the climate conversation ends, because it normally ends with affordability. And hands up, that does impact when we're talking about heat pumps and EVs and insulating our houses. But when you measure what the cost of not doing it is, and then throw in all those benefits you get back, why wouldn't the government pay for it when they've paid for all the other important things? When you think about it like this, it literally makes no sense. And so, the government should be funding the installation of our homes from the worst ones up. The EVs, maybe that's one that will sort itself out, but heat pumps, you shouldn't have to if you can't afford to buy a heat pump. Well, you're not going to buy a heat pump. There should be policies and incentives for making that happen. Why? Because we get all those benefits. We suddenly get a more stable economy as well, because we're not buying our energy in. Going back to the general, we're not being exposed to these destabilizing impacts because we'll be generating our own energy. And actually, right-wing people should love that. That's homegrown energy. It's ours. We've created it. It makes us safe and secure, and it saves us money and makes us healthier. This whole affordability thing is nuts. It's not discussed in a way that seems to deal with it head on. And I think we're going back to that point earlier where MPs haven't got this information. They've got all the lobbyists working on them. We've got the vested interests funding all the media that pushes it all in the opposite direction. So the arguments that are just killer arguments really for why we should do this are not landing, or they're not even getting airtime. So our economics element to the briefing is super critical.
I want to go back to something you said earlier, which I haven't heard very much, is a one-way gate. And I'm intrigued what your one-way gate was.
That's a good one. Yeah, it's all Kevin Anderson's fault. Yeah, so I was at a place where I used to work in sustainability and insurance, and that I thought that would be where I could have a huge impact, or not huge, an impact, because insurers have all this power. They could stop fossil fuel projects going ahead if they don't insure them. They can't get finance, and I thought this could be interesting tipping point within this industry, and then was quite shocked how few people in insurance knew anything about climate impacts. Maybe they did in the actuaries element of the insurance industry, but not in the sort of insurance world that we all know, in the sort of front end of it. And at the same time, that was in my work life. At the same time, in my personal life, you're starting to try and communicate what you're worried about within your network.
It's very hard.
It's very hard. Why you maybe not flying? I had a trip with some friends, and it was like, can we take the train? And it was like, why? And then someone called me Greta. This is about 6 years ago. I know. These are compassionate, progressive people that are good friends, but we all live in
I've had this exact thing.
Exactly. But we all live in a separate information bubble, don't we? So then I'm there with that talk by Kevin Anderson. It looks like my son shot it on his phone. And it was listening to that and then worrying about, I don't want to be the only person that knows this. And so it was the facts of what I had learned. And then it was the realization that, the grown-ups aren't coming along to sort all this out. And I'm sort of stuck in this little world where me and this select other group of people know it, but we aren't enough. And that slowly seeped in. So it was a combination of, peering over the abyss, which I think you have to do, and making peace with that, and then realizing that you can't be an observer anymore. And so I'm lucky. I'm in a financially comfortable situation, so I had some fun. So I effectively took the Kevin Anderson clip and found some creative people who wouldn't laugh at me and said, "Look, can can we make everyone listen to this guy? And in my head, package him up like we do iPhones and trainers and fashion and music. And it was, they have the creative skills to come up with, hey, let's get comedians to translate it. So my moment was these steps from, yes, learning how bad it really is, accepting it, realizing that the grown-ups aren't coming to sort it all out, and not wanting to be an observer. And then I sometimes talk about having a little chat with myself from, maybe 20, 30 or 40 when I didn't do anything, and how furious I would be as a father, as a parent, if I didn't. And I think that was the kick to get me to spend the money. I'd already had the kick to be active in this space, but the kick to actually part with some of the money that I was leaving to my kids effectively. If you're lucky enough to make some, you're taught to nurture it, not throw it around. Well, certainly that's my way of thinking. And then, you sit there and go, well, actually, no, I've just read the Institute of Actuaries report. From 2070 to 2090, half of global GDP will disappear. So what money that am I leaving behind? It won't exist, really, because say that did happen, 50%, and these are the actuaries. They're not known for exaggeration.
They're not activists. They're actuaries.
These are the most conservative, sensible people on the planet. We wouldn't get on a plane with the kind of odds that they do odds for everything. It's risk. They're risk experts, and so there's going to be the greatest crash that there ever has been, isn't there? How can we just sit there and go, oh, GDP's dropped 50%? Don't worry, it'll probably be all sorted by tomorrow tea time, because it'll have such a permanence to it, won't it? So if you're someone who's thinking about legacy, all those thoughts about later on, 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever you are, if you're lucky enough to leave behind, it won't exist, or you won't be able to spend it on anything, because we'll have Mad Max style chaos. So the spending some money part, came a bit later when I finally processed that.
Can I ask? So you used to run a business with your brother, making roof tiles, and you stopped. When you stopped doing that, did you know that you wanted to do something in the climate space, or is it you kind of took a step back from that and then you were kind of looking around, or was it like you knew that you needed to spend time on the climate related stuff and so you put it aside?
Do you know what? No, I had no idea. We moved straight to Devon at that point, and I think in my naive head I thought I'll have time to learn to surf. That never happened. No, I think what happens is you always carry worry in life. And when I didn't have to worry, I think, about, mortgage and other things like that, I think the worry just shifted. So there's always, no matter where
it's like
you
Maslow's
are,
hierarchy.
It's all relative, isn't it? Yeah, you're always going to worry about something because that's just the nature of being human. But also, I would say that when I was early on in my career, we used to burn a lot of gas. And so we learned quite early on about the issue of carbon through the industry that we were in. And back then, I remember thinking, oh, so we need to cut emissions by 1% a year. That's fine. No problem. We won't even notice that's happening. And then roll forward, 25 years, and it hasn't happened. So I think there was a sense of, oh, wait, this is that thing I first got worried about all that time ago. And I'm now an observer watching it just still happen. So it slowly creeped in, I think. And then the fever just builds as you realize that we are now, you, me, us, everyone listening to this, we're the generation, that can fix it if we pull together. So it's a bit of a moment now, isn't it?
I think, was it Obama who said we're the first generation to know the full impacts of climate change and the last one to be able to do something about it?
We'll trust him to have a better way of summing it up than I just tried to do. Yeah, that's perfect, isn't it? But I would like to stress, if you're younger than me, I'm 55 years old. I don't think people should be taking this on as a personal weight in many ways, because it's my generation that have put us here. So I feel that extra impetus, and I know my brother's the same. I know there are lots of young activists. Lots of young activists there now who are, really pushing. But I know lots of young people who just, this is too negative. I'm not interested. But in a way, I sympathise with all people who of a younger age, because you have not put us in this position.
What do you mentioned about your son filming on his phone at uni? how do you talk to your kids about this? Do they understand your concern and share it, or they're kind of like, Dad's got a new project and he's spending a lot of money on it?
No, they're with it. Yeah, I mean, because I would probably end up talking about it all the time. We don't talk about it tons at home, but they're fully. It's obviously seeped in. They're fully aware of everything, but they themselves will say they've got plenty of friends who just do not talk about it. And I think, about 5 years ago, I thought, oh, the entire young generation is just going to get up and sweep sort of the old generation aside and make change happen. But it doesn't work like that, does it? Because not everyone has that same reaction. And why, like I say, why would you when you haven't caused a problem? And this is quite critical. And Zach Polanski did this in his little film where he's walking down the street in Leeds. Have you seen it was a great beginning about how he used to wake up and have that inner sense of positivity just about the world.
Yes.
I can completely relate to that. When I was young, you were going to live longer than your parents. Everything that they had, you were going to have stuff like that, but better stuff, because technology was really exciting and it kept getting better. There was no long-term threats to the planet. You would probably earn more than your parents. You could probably just at that point afford to buy a house, which would be worth more than your parents' house. So the whole process of being invested in the system was going to deliver what your parents got, but slightly better.
But better.
Yeah. And so that was like, well, obviously everyone was on their own personal trajectories, and plenty of people, it didn't, had issues like in any part of life. But the backdrop was, we're just on the up. It's cool. And so, yeah, if you go up in the world now, then look at what's laid out before you, then I'm not surprised at the whole sort of variance in reactions that some people have. So, and whichever way people go, complete sympathy. Like I say, you guys didn't cause the problem.
So then you decided to work on Climate Science Breakthrough, and at its, some of its headline successes, it was featured on Good Morning Britain. It had 10 million views across social. It got featured by people like Gary Lineker or Ellie Goulding, shared by people like Chris Packham. But it didn't start off as like some grand, like this is hit the ground running and an immediate success from day one. Like what did it look like? You went to the guys you mentioned earlier and said, I'd like to do something and I don't know what, or you said I'd like a comedy kind of science sketch?
No, I literally, so this was the tail end of COVID. And I think I spotted them. They did a sort of stunt at COP26 with an air raid siren. And I've been reaching out to climate scientists actually, because all I had in my head was take the message, take Kevin, and just package it in a more serious way. It can't be that difficult. But I'm not creative enough to have, to know how that mechanism will work. And the whole point was it had to cut through and go beyond the bubble, didn't it? So it couldn't just be watched by all the people who were already scared and go, oh, look, there's Kevin saying the words I heard him say last week, but shot really well. Great. That wouldn't have worked. And so I literally just approached him and say, you don't know me, but, and we went from there. So these two gentlemen are Ben Carey and Henrik Delahag. And they'd come out of the advertising industry and formed this sort of climate comms lab called Utopia Bureau. So it just started with messages, and it, I explained it as I've explained it to you, and then we just started bouncing ideas backwards and forwards. Some of the ideas were great, some were silly, some were interesting, and it sort of went round like that until one day they said, "Yeah, well, what if we got comedians to translate them?" And I was already on board before I'd got to the end of the sentence, but then it was followed with all the reasons, because comedians are trusted messengers. We allow comedians to talk about stuff that we maybe are uncomfortable with talking about, or don't like talking about, or won't normally listen to. So that's how the whole the comedy shtick works. It's observational, and it brings you into different areas of the culture that maybe you haven't thought about before, and presents them back to you in a way that you can digest. But also, climate scientists are boring. Sorry, climate scientists. It's complicated, and it's data heavy, and actually it's not their job it really isn't their job to sell the, you work on this paper, you do all this research. It shouldn't be your job to sell it in a sort of snappy, modern day content driven way like we're all used to. That's not
Some kind of TikTok reel.
Yeah. Why did we expect that? That's what they should also do. And so the idea is the comedian is there to listen to that stuff that we know people aren't listening to. Either because they switch off because it's scary, or they're just I'm not into that, or a whole gamut of reasons, and package it up in a way that allows them to listen to it. And there's loads of research on why comedy opens us up more to be more susceptible to thinking, stops defensiveness and allows us to empathize with the other side and see things more broadly, etc., etc. And so the idea just seemed brilliant, and I don't think we really knew where it would go. But I have to thank Kiri Pritchard McLean, because she was the first. We tried reaching out to every comedian we could think of who had a big platform. Climate scientists was easy because we knew lots of climate scientists through being a campaigner, and it was Kiri Pritchard McLean who just said yes. Here we were with no track record. We'd formed this, climate science breakthrough, this idea. It's just all an idea. And it was through Kiri that we got Jonathan Pye. And it was through Jonathan Pye that we then got Nish. And it was kind of through Nish Kumar.
Yeah.
So the Nish Kumar was the third. And it was kind of through Nish Kumar that we got Joe Brown. But I have to give a shout out to my sister, because Joe Brand kind of panned out like this. I get a phone call one day, I think I was in the garden. It's like, "Hi, it's Nick. I'm just at a comedy festival. Do you want Joe Brand for your next film?" This is my sister. And I was like, yeah. And she said, "Right, I'll go and ask her." And so she was apparently having a really bad gig in Henley, with quite a right-wing sort of audience. And the jokes weren't going down very well. And what a brave woman to go up against, a crowd that maybe doesn't into her kind of humour. And so my sister sort of talked her way backstage, and there she was having a fag and just said, "Hey, my brother makes his climate film," and that just happened from there. And so that landed us with our fourth, and I think it was Joe Brand and Professor Mark Maslin who got onto GMTV, and that was a bit of a high watermark actually. Because suddenly, they're in a room where they have climate conversations. This is a mainstream media, moment, but climate conversations that normally end with, "Oh, you've been on a plane once. How did you drive to the studio?" All this kind of whataboutery that normally sends these poor climate campaigners into disarray as people like Richard Madeley sort of throw this stuff at them. But because we had a climate scientist sat next to a national treasure, Joe Brand, it was a really well-behaved interview. And they actually properly got to talk about the science, because you're not going to start throwing your weight around when there's a professor in the room. So, yeah, it kind of went from there. And then we made one in the States last year, which is funded from philanthropy in the States. And we are currently planning 2 more in the US next year.
Wow. And so you're planning more, and I guess the interlink between national emergency briefing and climate science breakthrough is, I suppose, both have grassroots elements. They're both like trying to influence popular culture, but national emergency briefing is quite top down. Was that like an intentional kind of climate science breakthrough is really good, it's got a lot of traction, but it needs to also be top down? Or was there that kind of like strategic element, or why did you decide to do one after the other if it was a kind of sequential decision?
Well, I have to hand that to my brother, because he'd arrived effectively, I think, as climate communicators. We're sort of doing the same thing. We're trying to get more people to create more of a moment, get more people acting and shouting and calling for change. This is a numbers game. You have the weight of the vested interests, their massive influence over the media, over politics. And unless it's like a hugely major priority from the public, we will never override that power of the vested interests. So Climate Science Breakthrough was trying to do that through the culture, very much so. This is trying to do it by coming straight in at the establishment and reaching those people who really, really, really can make the decisions that we really, really need. So I suppose the top down, the event is very different, but then yes, the grassroots element that's going to follow next year will be more similar to Climate Science Breakthrough. But I think where there are quite a few comparisons. So in a Climate Science Breakthrough film, as I said, we cover the really scary stuff and we arc through. We add a bit out. We go from the really scary stuff. We add a bit of outrage. It's those guys over there in the fossil fuel industry who are stopping all the changes you need. And then we always end on the positive. And there's so much great data from social science on ending on the positive and how that reinforces what you're trying to do. And the talks in the National Emergency Briefing follow a similar narrative arc. And then my co-founders from Climate Science Breakthrough they're going to be shaping the film. And again, I'll be trying to follow a narrative arc, a bit good storytelling, and making sure it's more emotive so it connects with people. So the event in the hall will be quite dry because it's a briefing by experts. They're not entertainers, but you'll have all the majesty of the hall and the moment and the other people. And so the people there will get all that extra sort of oomph. But if we just shot that in film and just threw it out there, it wouldn't be very exciting. So my colleagues are going to be bringing in the whole all their skills in making this emotive and enabling people to connect with it. So drawing all those skills to tell a good story in the way they put the film together, which, as I said, will include reactions of people who were there, as all I'll give away from now, because we're still shaping it. So yeah, there's plenty of crossover, I guess, in the two things, but it's down to my brother that this is really happening, and I just happen to have jumped in there with him and helped him deliver it.
What was the hardest part about the Climate Science Breakthrough, the whole process, not necessarily just the actual day, but the entire thing?
Well, I thought would be hardest. Well, there's a few things. We thought it'd be really hard to pin down a climate scientist. They all said yes straight away, like yes, and they were literally, can I do one? And then I thought going viral would be, I don't know how you do that, because that's not something I have massive experience in. And it seems to be quite abstract, the reasons why things do and don't they? But it's often more entertaining, slightly silly things that go viral rather than slightly serious things that do. So, God bless Chris Packham when he got onto us when we put out our first tweet and said, can I post these direct? That was super powerful because you just couldn't keep up with the notifications. It went off the charts. I've never seen anything like it. Obviously, that's now no longer possible. Thank you, Elon Musk. But I would say probably the hardest thing is trying to pin down a comedian. These people are unbelievably busy. And I think what happens is if you're hot property in the sort of public sphere, I think it seems to me that every single moment of your day is accounted for. Because we would get, there are some names that we didn't get, and I'm hoping to still get, so I won't name them, but we would get a comment like, well, they, in 4 months' time, they can give you an hour or an hour and a half on Tuesday afternoon. So just trying to nail down, because we have to make the film, we're there the whole day. It's a long day. We have the climate scientist there all day, and the comedian we need for about 4 hours, 5 hours. We can do less. And that is so hard to secure. We're not paying. No one's being paid. Or the crew in the film, but the talent, as they're called, is not. So the climate scientist and the comedian are not being paid. So that is a really, really long-winded process of working with a talent agent and just trying to maneuver something in a situation that might work and the timing might work, but it's herding cats. I think it's really quite, and then the whole thing rests on that moment, and so you've got a project that doesn't exist until the day the comedian actually says yes. But in the meantime, you're writing scripts, you're moving the whole thing onwards, you're starting to book things. It's nail biting basically. Securing a comedian is tricky.
Are you finding that's a very hard part, securing? Because I guess for the National Emergency Briefing, it's less kind of dependent on the celeb turning up. It's more dependent on the bigwigs turning up. But is that kind of the main challenge also of the briefing?
I guess the briefing's primary challenge is getting the MPs there. That's always going to be a difficult thing for any event with MPs. We are trying. So what we've learned from Climate Science Breakthrough and what anyone and we're working with some great PR people. Working with Frankie Oliver, who is just a really fantastic PR lady. The power of influence is extraordinary, and you can see that now, having done the work I've done. When you work to secure this person, and then you see the impact of this person who might not normally speak out about climate, talk about climate, like when Joe Brand did and Jonathan Pye did. It's really powerful, and it's just the way our world's shifted to, isn't it? It's all about shifting social norms for us. So the ultimate would be to think of the most famous mainstream comedian you can think of who's never spoken about climate. I'm not going to try and name one now, and have them suddenly speak out. That will be powerful because they haven't normally done so. And then people watching will think, well, if they're worried about it, maybe I should be worried about it. So it's very powerful. And with the briefing, we are working on trying to get people with influence to come and speak out about it, come and amplify what we're doing. Again, I won't say too much because hopefully there'll be some announcements shortly. But that is a tricky process. It's an all or nothing process. You can try, and then you might or you might not. But that's just where the power of communication lies in today's world, isn't it? With people who've got platforms. But for them, it must be tricky because who would you want to speak out on climate? Bearing in mind how some of those interviews used to go on Good Morning Britain or other TV shows where you get given grief because you probably are a big emitter because you've got a bit of money and you do stuff that emits carbon. So yeah, sticking your head above the parapet is a hard one. So huge respect to any of them who do. But if it's circular, isn't it? If we got all the influential people in the country into that briefing, and then they would realize the power of their influence is so key right now at this moment. So they could really sway us in en masse, couldn't they? If all the big football names, sports names, music names, acting names, all the people, I guess we trust, all those figures that we trust. We all have different ones, don't we, that we like and don't like, but there's trust there, isn't there? And so if they all started speaking out en masse, it would change everything effectively. So this is, a tiny part of shifting in that direction.
Can I ask, after 25 days, obviously you'll go on to promote the film of the briefing, but do you have your next thing, your next campaign lined up? Will you be refocusing on Climate Science Breakthrough? So
after the event, some time off, but the film will be in a whole world of editing. How do we get all this footage and turn it into a film? So that'll be a job. But we are hoping, we have some funding lined up for another one, possibly two, climate science translated films in the US. So it'll be moving from one thing to the other, really. So it goes on and on. But there'll certainly be some downtime this December. Well, there'll have to be.
Yeah, I mean, you'll be very glad of it because it'll be a non-stop push until the briefing, I guess.
Do you know what? It's genuinely hard to see beyond the 27th of November. So that's just the finishing line is the focus at the moment.
Can I ask if someone's really enjoyed and been interested in what you've said? You've mentioned a few talks that have been really pivotal for you, but is there any resources or books, podcasts, organizations, research papers, scientists that you, if maybe top sort of 1 to 3 that you would say this is? I think the Climate Science Breakthrough videos are ones that I've sent to other people, so you can use that as one of your suggestions. But are there any others?
Oh, well, without doubt, the Climate Science Breakthrough. Do you know what? That's a really tricky question, and it goes back to something I was thinking of before we started chatting. And my brother feels strongly about this as well. When we're doing what you've talked about, where you're talking to someone who hasn't come on stream yet, but is maybe on the periphery of worrying about this thing, but doesn't really totally understand what the whole climate thing is about. it's nearly impossible to send them anywhere to one place because there isn't. I remember this Chatham House report. It was 2021. It was hundreds of pages long, and it was supposed to go through all the risks. And who am I going to send that to? So one of the things we want from this event is we're going to have this library of concise, high-level talks on absolutely the things you need to know. So I think the thing I'll say is wait till the briefings happen and some people there. But the thing I did, I used Twitter before it got up by Elon, and I learned from following climate scientists basically, and I would follow climate scientists or people who work in that, in that sector. So Paul Behrens on food, Professor Tim Linton, we haven't talked about him, the global expert on tipping points. He has a fantastic new book out because tipping points are the super scary ones that we can't reverse if they kick off, but they're also positive ones. So that idea of a positive social tipping point, I think, is so tantalizingly powerful, and he has a book out on that. So I would follow work on that. Professor Hugh Montgomery, who is the health and climate expert, I haven't seen it for years, but he has an incredibly powerful YouTube scare the pants off you a presentation. But I'd wait till ours actually.
Okay.
Yeah, it's hard. It's a really important point. There is no one place to go to get your head around the whole thing. So I think that's calling out for why we need to have this briefing.
It's funny enough, actually, why I started this podcast is because after I had a fairly overnight shit moment kind of going through the door, I was like, I wanted to consume stuff that's like you do if you want to learn about branding or marketing or design or anything in coding, anything in the world you want to learn. You can go to a YouTube channel or a person or and you'll find like the thing to learn about it. But for climate, there's books, there's a lot of books, but there isn't like kind of top of funnel stuff. Like, say I just want to spend like 10 minutes or I just want to listen to something for an hour that's not like going to slap me over the face with depressing doomism.
Yeah.
Then it's a bit like, well, where do I go? And there's definitely more of that stuff, and there's an increasing amount of it, which is awesome. But I think there needs to be 10, 100, 1,000 times more of it.
I couldn't agree more. And my brain is still whirring. And maybe if there's something that comes after this chat, I'll send it to you. But it is an issue. The ones I think I recommend people to turn to, but again, it's hard to zero in on them, is the paybacks from decarbonising. So learning, I think for all of us to learn all this counter information to push back against what the vested interests are pushing out. So learning about the true cost of net zero, learning about the payback of net zero, learning about the fact that renewables really are cheaper than fossil fuels, and just there's plenty of juice out there, which you can pick up from various social media sites if you follow the people who know what they're talking about. And I think for all of us, and it shouldn't be our job, but it's the pushback. The other side are ridiculously well funded, and they seem to come together really well. I mean, Rutger Bregman I would listen to when he talks about the problem the progressives are making. I think he has a new book out, but he's talking about how we are failing because we've got this problem with moral purity. So I would only work with you, Rob, if we agreed on 100% of all the issues that we could possibly discuss. And if there was one that was different, we would not work together. Whereas on the right, they managed to, come together in these coalitions where they don't agree on everything at all, but they're absolute purpose, clear messaging, no messing, bush. And on the left, we get all tangled up in the minutiae of who exactly is agreeing with everyone on everything and whether or not that's the correct thing and is it ethically sound, and then it all unravels. And so,
and
I
we
think we just need to get a bit more together with on purposeful about that.
Yeah. And we kind of start eating our own arm on our own legs by saying, oh, well, you're flying and you aren't 100% plant-based, and so you can't speak about that, or you haven't done a PhD, so I don't want to hear about you. And where's your book? How do you know about this?
Where's your book?
Can be quite exclusionary.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I was reading about why the Dutch election just went the right way the other day, and apparently the leader was got round that, was much better at working in coalitions with people who didn't agree on everything. And maybe the signs of us, the progressives, getting that a little bit more. But I love that expression. Yeah, your moral purity is destroying your ambition to succeed, or something along those lines, from Rutger Bregman. So I would check him out. He's a great thinker.
Last question. What do you think is most underrated, and what you think is most overrated in the climate world as a whole?
Oh, goodness.
We can cut out any
the
thinking
one that,
part.
I hope this fits, but the one that springs to mind is people in, I suppose, the space I'm now in, which is telling climate stories and communicating with people about climate. There was so much talk about stop scaring people. And I think that's maybe damaged. I know why it was coming from. It was coming from good reasons. If you only do that, doomer headlines and walk away. Well, of course, that does not work. And that makes people, people just go inwardly and withdraw. But I think a lot of people translated it to be stop talking about the serious shit entirely and just tell positive stories. And, we need to be doing multiple things on multiple levels that are all very varied. I get that. But if all the climate communicators lean into that, then maybe that's contributed to climate slipping down the list of things to worry about. I know there are massive external reasons why other things have risen up the list, cost of living probably being the biggest one. But though I think the way that my psychology sort of works is I need context if you're going to tell me why I should do something as to why I should do it. So if you just give me the positive thing, is this really important? Should I be worrying about this? You seem, often get told, Nick, you seem very passionate about, you're really into the environment. No, this isn't about passion. This is not my hobby. This isn't something I really, really enjoy doing. This is about stopping the world falling apart, and actually your world as well. So I think we've got to address the really scary shit. We just simply have to. But we all need to get clever about how we put it together. I really like Genevieve Gunther, who's written the book about climate politics. Fantastic book. Especially the stuff on economics is really powerful. But she says when you have fear on its own, it doesn't work, and people withdraw. We know that. But when you add outrage onto fear, that provides the energy for people to act. So my wife works in river pollution, and that whole thing about the river being full of shit is really fires people up. How dare those fuckers put shit in my river?
Put my poo in the river.
Yeah. So they get really fired up because the outrage is added on to the problem. If you're just told, we don't know why, but the rivers are all polluted. Oh, but it's those people over there who are just literally just pouring it in just to make a bit, just to make profit. So outrage is really powerful. But then always go back to this thing about ending on the positive. And I wish I had more time to go into the social science of this, but it seems really, really, really powerful and solid that you must wrap up with that sort of positive vision. And it's a simple fact that there is a positive vision. If you go to any sector that we talk about in the briefing, they all have these underlying positive, most of them, just about all of them, positive stories, positive tipping points as opposed to negative ones. The nature recovery prospects of shifting diet, the cleaner, cheaper energy from shifting to renewables. They've all got great stories with nice vision behind them. And I think we need to get a bit more bold about going there, but we have to keep the context on the table, because if we don't, it just slips down the list of things to worry about and people don't take it seriously.
So where can people go to find out about the briefing and get there and rally their MP? And if people are listening after it's already come out, where can they go to get the videos and then distribute it?
Sure. So it's anybriefing.org. So literally go onto our website. I hope you can share this in the show notes, but you drop on our website and you're presented with a postcode checker. You drop in your postcode, hit return, and it will tell you immediately if your MP has confirmed attendance. They probably haven't, because we have about 100 parliamentarians and obviously 650. And it will tell you they haven't, and you can then send them an email. It's a reasonably simple process. You need to write an original email because spam filters are quite clever at spotting patterns these days, particularly with MPs. So you need to write your reasons why. But then you could also go and use, which you kindly share today, use our little tool to look up your MP's personalised video invitation. So we have made we think a world first in digital civic engagement. We've made a personalised video for every single MP. For desktop, it sort of runs through a Google Sheet, so you have to do a command function to search for your MP, and then you find the video, download it. And if it's on your phone, it's a Google Doc. But you have to do a little process of searching to find it, and then you download that video. And I'd recommend emailing the link to the MP with your request. But I would also recommend you posting it on social media and asking and tagging your MP. So getting that whole moment where MPs are seeing all these different MP videos pop up across the social media sphere will be really powerful. One important point to remember: an MP is only obliged to even read an email if it's come from a constituent. So you need to prove that you're a constituent. I think that means putting in your name and address. I should know that, but I think that means putting in your name and address in, so they know who they're responding to. So you can't just blindly barrage, say, Nigel Farage to go to this meeting if you don't live in his constituency. But if you do, I would encourage you to do so. And I think, creating a bit of a moment through us all en masse doing that, I think is going to give us a great shot at getting these guys to turn up.
Okay. Thank you very much, Nick. Really, really enjoyed it.
My pleasure. Fantastic. Really good to talk to you, Rob.
Cheers. Toodaloo.
Yeah. And have a good one with Mike.
Yes, definitely.